Welcome, everybody, to another episode of, I always forget, it's Tuesday Turf Talk with the Tools or something like that, or with the lawn tools. I don't know. But this is Right Tool. I'm Jordan Netzel, and today our guest is Adam Russell from Mountain View Seeds. Is that right, Adam?
That's right. We'll talk a little bit about how we're changing, a couple of roles, couple of my titles just recently.
Oh.
So we'll talk about some of that.
Well, hey, I feel like let's establish some credibility here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and where you're at now, what kind of things are coming up and getting exciting for you here in the near future?
Yeah. So I am, I grew up in between Athens, Georgia and Augusta, Georgia, in a small town of about 4,000. My parents were school teachers. No one in my family had ever been in the grass growing business, turf grass, anything related to landscape. And so I'm a bit of an odd duck in my family. I went to the University of Georgia. I was a landscape architect at the University of Georgia, graduated there. But in between, I had done everything from golf course maintenance. I did a little bit of sports turf maintenance. I started out at Georgia Southern, where I was born in Statesboro before my parents moved up between Athens and Augusta. So I did sports turf maintenance down there at Bullitt County Parks and Rec, just ball fields and mowing and just related um, landscaping through there. And then had lawn care maintenance experience. And then after school, well, really through my internship, got into golf course construction and decided I wanted to be a shaper. Well, the recession happened, and so I hooked on with a good group, Renaissance Golf Design, out of Traverse City, Michigan. It's probably more famously known for Tom Doak and some of his golf course designs. But we did one course in Denver, Colorado, and then the recession hit, and I just couldn't pick up with them. And I didn't want to travel to the ends of the earth to be a golf course shaper. So I took a sales job, didn't know what it was, with Pennington Seed. Worked there for about 7.5 years, mainly in the professional side of the business, seed, fertilizer, a little bit of sports turf, a little bit of golf, but mainly erosion control. And then for the last 4 years, I've worked for Mountain View Seeds as the director of product development. So I've kind of dabbled in a little bit of everything. I wanted to do that on purpose. I always felt like I'd rather know a little bit about everything than just be an expert in one thing and ignorant, in everything else. But it served me pretty well, and I've got to touch a lot of different parts of the business and feel fortunate at that. So right now, I'm transitioning from my role as director of product development with Mountain View. So anything where a new cultivar, anything to do with the naming of those cultivars, the research with universities, working with our director of agronomy, Dr. Greg Munshaw, with internal trials, external trials, and just the general onboarding of our products through our various channels, wholesale distribution, online, retail, whatever it is. And I'm phasing out of that into my new role, which is vice president of MVP genetics. So MVP is Mountain View Performance Genetics. And so what Mountain View is going to look to do is bridge the gap between seed and vegetative cultivars. And so MVP Genetics will be the group that I will lead that will handle vegetative cultivars and licensing them to sod farms and end users in the form of sod or sprigs only. And so we needed that division of business and different leadership, and ultimately it will become its own company. But we needed that separation between seed and sod. But ultimately, as a research entity, Mountain View is going to do both. And that's the first time that's really ever happened. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, awesome. Actually, because I think Finn had told me that there's a couple new varieties that you guys are coming out with. But I kind of want to go to the topic. So this show, I'm doing air quotes here. I know you can't see that, but this show is sort of centered around you guys and you pros sort of helping us homeowners learn a thing or two. I thought it would be kind of cool to ask the seed guy a couple questions. Give us sort of the, I don't know, fifth grade reading level version of the best way to plant seed. If you're going to do a seeded area of your yard, what sort of steps should you take to put seed down? And I'll give you a little bit of a reference for my question or some context here. So as a homeowner, I get information from all over the place, different people on YouTube, different homeowners, and there's a lot of conflicting information. And it's funny, my approach has always been, I don't know, let's keep it as simple as possible and let's keep the
Sure.
seed wet and it'll probably grow. But then some people are very passionate that you're supposed to water only 3 times a day. And some people are very passionate that you're supposed to water 15 minutes out of every hour of the day. So anyway, that sort of stuff, like we can get down to nitty gritty details if you want, but sort of just give us the 5th grade reading level version of how do you plant seed? What are the best practices for seeding a new section of your lawn?
Yeah, well, the first thing I think about is, is it new, bare ground, or is it existing ground that you're renovating, right? And so the first thing I think about is soil health and seedbed preparation. And so you want to get your soil off to the best possible start it can, either through amendment, a soil test to figure out what you're going to have before the seed comes up, because it makes your life drastically easier when you can amend when there's nothing on top of it or nothing actively growing. So we want to get that right first. And then, we either want to kill off any existing vegetation, which will be competition against seed that comes up eventually, seedlings, juvenile seedlings, or we want to get the seed bed prepped if it's new ground, already bare ground, to the point that it can accept the seed and be firm enough and have enough cover without being too soft and preventing the seed from fully germinating to its fullest potential, depending on species. So that's kind of the first thing I think about, and then we look for uniform application, and there's many different ways to do it. I mean, there's broadcasting, there's slit seeding, there's hydro seeding, there's numerous different ways that you can apply the seed to the ground. But we basically want enough uniform dispersion and distribution that you can get even coverage when the seed does come up, and it's the quickest and efficient way for you as a homeowner. So it's really about feel and doing it over time to get what works for you. There's no one way. There's no one way I've recommended. I've done all the different ways with various levels of good success. But once you get to the point where, we've had germination and that process has started, hopefully after you've applied some water, consistency is the key in everything. And so consistency in feeding, no matter what you feed the plants, synthetic fertilizer, organic fertilizer, amendments, micronutrients, biostimulants, it doesn't matter as much as to me as the consistency of doing it, to pick your schedule and to keep it consistent. So for me, for moisture level for new seedlings, I like consistency of moisture, to the point where you start to get active growth and full growth after a certain period. So I like it, watering to the point of you just about made the ground puddle. And so you've kept that consistent moisture through the profile. So, whatever that is for your irrigation, whatever that is, whether it's manual or whether it's automatic irrigation, you're keeping consistent moisture in that seed bed throughout the time that it's germinating, and as it's going through the process, the initial, I'll say 14 days, depending on species, of when that's happening. And so you keep that moisture consistent through it, the plant responds, and you start getting the growth that you expect. And then as you do that, then you back off and go deeper, more infrequent cycles to build that root depth. So the further down you can push those roots by that deep, infrequent, almost natural cycle of water, like it would fall out of the sky, a thunderstorm, you would think about it. Get that infrequency, and those roots will drive down through your soil profile and be a healthier plant quicker. I like consistent, frequent early, and then as we progress to full germination, let's say 30 to 60 days, depending on your species, then you back up and become more infrequent. And there's all sorts of, people that'll say it's 15 minutes a zone, it's 5 minutes a zone, it's wherever. But I tend to be more water, less frequent at the end of the germination cycle, and more consistent, more frequent application of irrigation, lighter irrigation in the beginning. So it's a little bit of both.
I like it. And I think what comes into play too is, so for me, a homeowner, and I go to work every day, I'm limited by my equipment, I guess, because you could get some kind of a timer on your irrigation system or sprinkler that might do that automatically. 5 minutes out of every 30 or 15 minutes every whatever your plan was going to be. But for me, I don't. So it's just sort of water when you can. And I would come home on my lunch break and turn on the sprinkler. And then when I get home from work, turn on the sprinkler and just keep it wet as much as possible. And it's worked well for me. But so you're kind of limited by, obviously, work schedule and other obstacles.
Yeah, I mean, real life, it's like that's what you gotta figure. There's the textbook way to do it, which I've just described, and then there's the way that we all figure out, whether it's on a professional field or whether it's on a homeowner lawn, of what are the hurdles, the hindrances that are in the way of me doing it exactly by the book. And so ultimately, that's the fun part, or what I think is the art of growing grass, is you've got to figure out how to get over those hurdles and make it work for you. So there's no right or wrong way. There's the starting blueprint of what the best way we know of from a research standpoint, from looking at this as turfgrass science throughout the years. And then there's the part where you actually put the seed in the ground and make it work. So I tell people, and you'll meet people all the time that will do it completely opposite of the way you would teach it or want to do it, and they make it work, either because of their schedule or life, or it just happenstance. And you know what? I pat them on the back and go, good job. I hope it works for you in the future. I hope it's consistent like that in the future, because if it works for you, then it's the right way. I've seen people do it in many different ways, both right and wrong, and they've all worked. And so the ultimate goal is that you're happy, you don't put too much effort into it, and that you get the results that you want to get out of it. If you're not getting that out of it, you need to change something. Something needs to go back to the way it would normally be, in the textbook, or the way that you would learn it in a university setting, and the way that somebody would teach it to you if you're on a professional or a pro turf level.
Love it. Touch on fertilizer. So again, homeowner, I don't have time to do a soil test, or I don't have time to wait on those results to come back. Can I throw some fertilizer down? Should I do that at the beginning of when I'm seeding? Should I do it as it starts to germinate? I guess you risk running over the new seed. Touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I cannot stress the importance of a soil test enough. That is the part where I wouldn't even attempt a seeding if I had no idea, what was underneath. So, I mean, if you're a homeowner, it's the one variable that you can really control. What are my numbers underneath? What do I look like? And it's as simple as, taking a little sample, taking it down, or sending it into an extension office. They do the work for you for a very small amount of money. And it saves you so much time and effort and frustration, because then you've got that beginning blueprint. So I can't stress enough at how much more success you'll have by doing it that way than if you don't. If you don't get the soil test, or let's say you're a landscaper that maybe not able to soil test all your different yards. I mean, I think so highly of those guys that can produce consistent conditions yard to yard to yard like that, when they don't have any idea what's underneath their soil, because any of the guys on the highest level, they know exactly what their soil is. In fact, they engineer their soil to be a certain way so they can manage in a certain manner. So if you as a homeowner don't know what's underneath your feet, it's really hard to get the grass to grow in the way that you want, which is as effective and efficient as you possibly can, to use the least amount of resources as possible. So without that, you have baseline as far as fertility, of what you want to do in your area, whether it's 10, 10, 10 at 1 pound of N per 1,000 square feet, or triple 19 at a half pound, or whatever it is, in absence of a soil test. You always see that on the soil test recommendations. If you can't get one of these, then do this for your area. And so I would look into any local extension office will have that. And so if you can't get a soil test, or don't have the capacity to do that, that'll at least give you that baseline. But as a principle, and as what I think is a steward of the environment, I don't want to apply any sort of input unless I have knowledge that it needs to go down, or that my grass needs to have it. And so for me, I tend to wait until after I see green, or after something has popped or started to germinate, before I apply anything, and that's just kind of the way I've always been. Least amount of inputs, and hopefully the most efficiency I can get out of it.
Gotcha. I like it. So as far as, that it sort of takes us to the seeding process, but I do want to get to the stuff that you've got coming up. Again, Spin sent me some names. Something was like a bluegrass 365, and then a new type of Bermuda grass. I don't know if you can tell us everything about new stuff that's coming up, but why don't you go ahead and go into some of that?
Yeah, so part of our company's goal is research and development. So we take all our money, everything that we budget, and we put it into research and development. And so we own the largest private turfgrass research breeding facility in North America. It's 88 acres. It's in Oregon, Salem, Oregon, so Portland to Eugene, Oregon. Massive facility where we do all kind of trials on mostly cool season species. And then we work with universities on warm season and right now in our vegetative cultivars. So our goal is to have that engine driving new cultivar releases that use less water, less chemicals, less fertility, less inputs overall, and are stronger plants naturally. And we want to bring those out to you faster. And so, right now, this fall, I've got 7 new tall fescue releases that are categorically better than the previous generation we had, 10 years ago, which was about the last release cycle. I've got 6 new perennial ryegrasses in the last 2 years that were better than what we had before. A couple of turf type annuals, which help the professionals in a transition type category, depending on their use and play. The bluegrass, the 365 SS, is started as a custom blend for Will Schnell at the Rose Bowl. He actually picked it out based on the research and had no idea who we were. And then it's since developed into a flagship brand for us and one that we sell from everybody to, the highest of the high end sports, surf and golf to, any of the homeowners. We try to make our best stuff available to the most amount of people. It doesn't make sense for us to produce our best and have it with the least amount of availability. And so 365 SS, we try to make, available through either wholesale distribution or some online channels in as many pounds as we can. And so that's 365 SS. We've got bent grass. We've got, I don't know, 6 cultivars of bent grass that we'll have. We've got 2 new ones incoming this fall. And then you start getting into the warm season, which is really where we've moved into the past couple of years, so we can be well-rounded. We've done cool season grass, the majority of what we've done for the last, or really the agricultural cooperative that's our parent company since 1946, but Mountain View for 22 years. So we do about 110 million pounds. And so it's a large company that sells grass seed all over the world, but we want to make our best stuff available to you guys, to as many people as we can, so they can know us and trust our research and have the security and hopefully grow a better lawn easier, or a better golf course, a better sports turf, whatever it is. So warm season has been, from an acreage standpoint, the opportunity for our company. So you have something like Ironcutter. So Ironcutter is a vegetative cultivar. So instead of being a seeded cultivar where you want to plant something and produce it and have it produce the most seed yield as possible, seed on the plant, so we can give you the most, that we possibly can. We want to turn the dial in the other direction and have a stable, uniform cultivar that's aesthetically pleasing, but also doesn't produce viable seed. So it's only available in sod or sprigs only. And the delivery system for that is much different than grass seed. You wouldn't give it to a distributor. You wouldn't give it and sell it in online channels as Mountain View ourselves. You would do that through the producer network around the country, your local sod farms that know their farms and are much better than we are at it. And so Ironcutter has been the one. It was developed as a sports turf and golf grass. But it's a gorgeous looking grass. It's a very fine texture Bermuda grass, maybe the finest on the market, and that's saying something with what we've been doing with turfgrass breeding. But it's a strong, dense cultivar that resists wear and traffic, and that we're really, really high on. So we're trying to get that to sod producers in as much acreage as we can around the country and really around the world, so that people can have a new Bermuda grass cultivar that's the same in their lawn, as a warm season lawn as it is on a sports field or golf course. So, and we're doing well with that. We're starting to really take off with the product, and people are starting to know us, and that comes through my side. The MVP genetics side is where these sod farmers license it from, and where people will learn about what this different division is. Next up for us is a Zoysia. So we're going to go into Zoysia grass. Hopefully next year. We're tentatively scheduled for next year, but we have an experimental Zoysia. It's a fine textured Matrella type. So it's a cold tolerant, fine textured Zoysia grass. And so it was developed out of Southern Illinois University. So it was a bred research university grass. And we actually entered this into the NTEPs, the National Turfgrass Evaluation Program, under their warm season putting green trials. So we've been able to maintain this Zoysia at 0.125 inches. And we did that for 3 years in these trials. And it performed very well, along with, accepted ultra dwarf Bermuda grasses and other Zoysias that are more commercially known right now. And so it's up to us to continue that research work and make it able to grow at higher heights of cut, let's say for a residential lawn, and be able to do double duty, let's say, with the Zoysia grass. And if we can do that, I think it'll lead us to make it as exposed to people, more exposed to people as we can. So we're looking forward to that challenge, and then continuing to get into, St. Augustine grass and maybe even specialty grasses, warm season grasses like centipede or ultra dwarf Bermuda grasses. But we want to have the ability, when somebody asks us for what's the best thing I should do for my lawn or what's the best thing I should do for my site, that we have grasses on both sides of the spectrum, whether it's seed, sod, warm season, cool season, where we're just making the best recommendation instead of, in some ways, being prejudiced one way because that's all we got, And so we want to do what's best for that specific situation and that specific site. And that's where our research is going to take us. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We do have some warm season seeded types. Rio is the name of our seeded type, and it's a cold tolerant hybrid that was tested and performs very, very well as a new introduction. But as you can see, we can do both, and then we can also do cool and warm season. So we're looking forward to seeing where this new division of MVP genetics takes us. And we've already had some cool success, some cool places where it's taken us so far. So.
You have piqued my interest with Ironcutter, and then also your Zoysia variety that can be kept low. That really fine bladed stuff is what I like a lot. I'm gonna have to find some sod farm around me that has some of that. I like testing out lots of different types of grass, and I love just seeing all the different types and feeling the differences. But I was going to give you a piece of advice, though. Just stay away from that St. Augustine stuff. Just don't even worry about it.
For us, I mean, you look at how much acreage is St. Augustine, right? And it's a high input, and it uses a lot of inputs. And so we look at something like that and say, can we make it better, right? Can we make it easier for you where you take a negative? There's so many people that need it and rely upon it where a lot of other things can't grow. What it can do in shade, what it can do with wear and traffic, what it can do with salinity and bad water. We think that's promising. And so we look at something like that and say, well, if we can research it, can we make this a low input grass? That's why we love Zoysia, because even compared to Bermuda grass, Zoysia takes about half the inputs. And so for us, our belief is that the goal is for us to create an aesthetically pleasing turf grass, no matter the setting, with the fewest inputs possible. In some cases, the holy grail of turf grass breeding is no inputs at all. So you would just plant it and walk away, and it would look good. You wouldn't have to mow it. You wouldn't have to do anything to it, right? We're nowhere close to that, but that's the goal, because we think you need to go do something else. If you just could do the minor amount to your lawn, minor amount to your golf course or your sports turf facility, and then go do something else, because you have so many things pulling at your time, we think that's how we'll make the most money and be the most effective. So that's what we're going to try to do.
You're just saying all kinds of things here, Adam, that are offending me. You're telling me that here before long, I'm not going to have to mow my lawn anymore. You're talking to one of these homeowners that goes out and takes pride in mowing his lawn before his neighbor and, doing it 3 times a week just because that's some sort of a status symbol. But no, I'm just kidding. We totally get it. What?
And if that's your thing, we encourage it, right? I mean, if you want to make that your hobby, that's fine. What we see on the horizon is, water use restrictions, fertility restrictions, chemical restrictions. And so as turf grass producers and turf grass researchers, we got to get ahead of that for you. So we got to make grass strong enough that if they do take anything away, I doubt they'll ever take your mower away. So mow to your heart's content. But at some point we're going to have to, we're going to have to get a grass that's strong enough to use the fewest amount of inputs and still look good so you can stand on the sidewalk and dominate your neighbor. I mean, that's what we're all wanting here. And I do the same thing to some degree, but a lot of us on this side of the business that maintain turf 6-7 days a week, sometimes it feels like 8, we get home and I think a lot of people would be shocked at how bad of a lawn our condition is in. I mean, it's so we look as researchers to do the most with the least. So it'll be a long time before we take your mower away. How about that?
I'm just teasing anyway. Actually, I would love it if I didn't have to mow, but I could just go out and mow if I just wanted to like put some stripes down or something. If I didn't, really need to, it was just like, oh yeah, if I feel like mowing, I can go do it. So,
so you'll have an
hang out
mower.
And wait for your maintenance-free grass. Then I'm in.
Well, so we'll have the robots here in about 10 years. So you'll be able to have your robot do your daily mowing, and then, you can keep the old relic in the, in the garage and bring it out when you want to stripe up and really get after it,
What's crazy is the more you talk about it, the more I'm actually getting used to this idea. So I don't know. I am like top tier crazy homeowner. I've got what I like to call a golf course in my backyard, and it's not, any quality anywhere near like an actual golf course, but mowed like a fairway. But now you're talking. If I could have a mower that would just do all of that for me, and grass that would help it, so it's less maintenance, but then the mower could take care of what little maintenance it did have, then maybe I'd actually have time to practice golf and get better, because people comment on my videos and tell me how terrible my swing is. So
Bingo.
Maybe I would actually have time to actually practice on this golf course in my backyard, because right now I just have to mow it all the time.
And we're trying to work on that for you. I mean,
Nice.
that is what all the researchers, and there's so many talented ones, we're just a very, very small part of it. There's so many at universities all around the country, all around the world, really, that are working on this puzzle of, how do we make it easier for you? How do we consume less resources? How are we more sustainable in that way and help the environment, get people to see that, hey, grass is good. It's an integral part of what you want your house, your lawn, your golf course, your sports turf to be. But let's do it with a little bit less effort. And that's what I think we're headed towards. So it's going to be a fun future. We're really excited for it.
Yeah, no, I like it. That sounds awesome. I think we'll probably get to where we just kind of open up for questions. And so if anybody is raising their hand and wanting to ask a question, then someone can click on it and kind of help them get up here.
I was going to say, not everybody wants, all right?
Well, Adam, I've got one for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Ironcutter, does it represent anything that's out there now, like a little bit of the Tahoma, a little bit of the Latitude, any blends that came up with that we might be familiar with?
Yeah, so the head breeder of Ironcutter is Dr. Charles Taliaferro. And Dr. Taliaferro is a godfather in this business. I named Ironcutter after him. So it's a cool story. Taliaferro is an Italian name, and so it was originally Tagliaferro. And in Italian, Tagliaferro means iron cutter. And so they were blacksmiths, his family was, and somehow they made it over to Oklahoma, and he became what I call the godfather in turfgrass science, still living. You've got some guys from the University of Georgia that he worked with even back into the late 50s and early 60s, and Doc's still 80 plus years old, taking plot ratings in Enid, Oklahoma right now, and so he was the head breeder along with the team at Oklahoma State. So he has bred Guyman, which was the original seeded Bermuda grass, Wrangler, which is a cold tolerant forage seeded Bermuda, Riviera, Yukon, Monaco, Rio in the seeded types. And then in vegetative, he's on the patent for Patriot, Latitude, and Northbridge. And so he retired from Oklahoma State in 2011 and went to work for Johnston Seed Company and helped their research program that we had there look into vegetative cultivars. And so they started looking at Ironcutter about 2007, started to isolate it, and then began testing on it. It takes about 10 years to bring a vegetative cultivar to market, just like seed. And so they kept looking at it, entered it into the NTEPs. It did very, very well. But I guess based on past history, the best way I can describe it is a Latitude look on top with a Northbridge root system. is what we see. And that's pretty high praise. So I'm kind of hesitant to say that because we're still learning about the grass, but that's what the metrics show. It's a pretty grass that has a root system, and it's tough and it establishes, and I can't seem to kill it. And I've tried a lot of different ways by screwing it up. But it just seems to bounce back and perform, and it likes wherever we've put it, and it just doesn't seem to cause people a lot of trouble.
Wow. No, that sounds really promising. I mean, I have never seen a Bermuda that roots in so fast other than Tahoma. Tahoma in 5 days, you could probably play on it.
Yeah, and that's what the new generation cultivars, and I put Tahoma, and I think very highly of Dr. Wu, Oklahoma State, Tahoma, Chad Adcock, Sod Production Services. Think a lot of the whole network that they have there for Tahoma. And it is a dynamite cultivar. And that's what you get out of what I'll call the new class. And so in my opinion, there's a big three going forward until we get a new one. And it's Tahoma, it's Tiv Tough, and it's Ironcutter. And that's what you see consistently in the data, And so I think in the upper transition, in the cold tolerant parts of the world, you're talking Ironcutter and you're talking Tahoma. In the southern part, which is the part we're interested in, it has the most acreage, and we're interested in all of them. But I mean, you've got the most acreage worldwide. You also see the TIFs start to come in and do very, very well, but Ironcutter does as well. Drought tolerant metrics, California, Texas, Florida type metrics where you get into tropical zones. It does well too. So one of the things Dr. Talaferro isolated about it was broad adaptation. And so for a lot of people, they don't get really excited about that because it's not something that ends up on a brochure. It's not something that's very sexy. But for us as researchers, when you say broad adaptation, I mean, I can take it anywhere. If we're pushing the limits of the adaptation zone of Bermuda grass, we can take it to places it's never been. And so, yes, you see that. We've seen it start to root in 4 days. So we've had instances where people have sung some pretty high praises about it. We had somebody use it and they said it roots like an Alabama tick, and that's kind of been the going response when people say, hey, how's it doing? It's like, man, it's aggressive, it's almost so aggressive. And it really does introduce almost a different set of problems, right? So with these new tight, dense vegetative cultivars like Tahoma or Ironcutter, you kind of have problems interseeding into them. You kind of have problems putting down perennial ryegrass or Kentucky bluegrass into them. And so you really have to work a little bit harder at that because they were designed and bred almost to go as many months of your season as possible and still produce championship quality conditions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I had with Patriot. I could not overseed it to save my life. And, and in early April and May, the seed that I put down in September would germinate and it'd be beautiful. But when I had my Patriot so thick, I could not overseed it, even with grow blankets. Yep. It was that dense. And, I'm having that problem with the Tahoma too,
Yeah, it's something we're going to have to work on. So for both sides of the spectrum, not to get so technical in this, but you have what we do is grow out chamber trials. And so you see the internode between the leaf blades, you see, just the overall crown height is very different. So I'll put Tahoma almost in a dwarf category. It has the smallest rate of grow out, vertical growth. It's basically a putting green type grass and a very, very good one at 1 inch and lower type of deal. Then you see something like Tiv Tough, which is the largest type, very similar to Tiv 419 and it in a grow chamber is the largest grower. And so you have more space, more density or less density, for that sunlight to penetrate into and get something like a perennial ryegrass or a bluegrass established. And then Ironcutter tends to sit right in the middle. So it's not the smallest like Tahoma. It's not the biggest like Tiv Tough, but it just kind of sits in the middle. And again, we like that because that's broad adaptation. So we think it'll be a decent one to overseed into. You'll have to pull it. The new ones like being messed with. They like being verticutted. They like being aerated. They tend to respond really well to stress. But that's what it's going to take to get a good catch on the overseeding. So in some cases, I've recommended primo. In some cases, I've recommended, scalping, verticutting, anything that they could do, brushing. multiple seeding applications. We've tried to tinker with it all to figure out what's the right way to do it. And that's the part where we're still learning. Just because the grass is commercially released, anybody that tells you they know everything about the grass when it's commercially released hasn't been doing this long enough. We're still learning. So that's the kind of in-between stuff where we need to figure it out. But we know based on the research that it is going to be a little bit harder for these new ones, so you have to make a decision as a manager. Do I want to overseed it all, or if I do, what do I want to overseed with species wise? Or, this is where the rise of turf type annuals as a species class has come back in vogue. And we think shows promise, as a class of overseeding going forward.
OSU Turf Man said, I don't know if I'll make it on there, but ask him how big of a whammy he did when the Ironcutter went into the ground in Ohio.
Yeah, it was a big one. That was, Ryan and have taught and been talking to Ryan about this project for a year. And it's always big when you're the first field in a state of a commercial cultivar, right? So Pickerington North, their football field, last week, were able to install it. Pollock Landscaping couldn't have anybody better in the business to put it down. I mean, just got really lucky to have quality companies like Ryan's, Field Source, Pollock, to be able to put in a high school field. And there's truly nothing that makes me prouder than helping, a high school, Parks and Rec level. People that they'll say, this stuff's for the pros, right? But we want to make grass that can be just as good for the pros as the everyday person. And there's no reason the everyday person shouldn't have a field that's as safe and as playable and as good as some of the pros in the business. And so it made me really happy that the first field going in was a high school field in a place where they're adapting to Bermuda grass. Is it going to be a Bermuda grass field for the life cycle of the field? We think the cultivar is good enough to do that. We think the cold tolerance of it has been exceptional. We've grown this grass and been able to maintain it in Utah, in Denver, Colorado at a half-inch height of cut with a late sod on top of it. We've had negative 13-degree temperatures in Enid, Oklahoma with 340 hours of sub-freezing, and we didn't lose any of it. And that's the kind of stuff where, as a Bermuda grass guy, I'm a warm season guy, you look at it and go, wow, I didn't think it was going to do that. I thought we'd have a little bit of die-off, or I thought it would not be able to adapt to the cold like it has, because in my experience, cold is about the only thing that can kill Bermuda grass, and so the fact that it's adapting to that is wild. And I think it makes it a really cool time in turf grass breeding, because you can take it to places like Ohio where they can benefit from the recovery and the wear and the traffic tolerance and use less inputs to do it. But at the same time, if for whatever reason play, whatever it is, and it doesn't stay up to snuff 10 years from now, we have the ability to put something like a bluegrass seed on top of it and have the safety and security to know that the field will maintain its integrity, and it could be a better situation for them. So now we have options like Bermuda, now we have options like cold tolerant Bermuda grass, heat tolerant bluegrass, heat tolerant ryegrass, all the way down into lower Alabama, even down into the Jacksonville type area in certain specialty situations where we don't really know which one's going to win. Right now, warm season grasses are becoming more cold tolerant, in my opinion, than cool season grasses are becoming more warm tolerant. But all it takes is one cultivar to disrupt that, and we could be even again. You could have bluegrass in South Georgia, or Texas, in Austin or Southern, to that, or California, whatever it is. But what we want to guide us is which one's going to use the least amount of inputs and produce the safest conditions. So that one was a very, very cool one. Yeah, we were really, really proud to get that in through Ryan and Field Source and Pollock Landscaping. Some of the best guys in the business have been working for a year to get that right. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how it's going to perform. I think it's going to do excellent for them.
That's awesome. Well, I think I'm going to head out. You guys are welcome to stay and ask questions. I'm not sure, Adam, if you have time restrictions, you just tell everybody when you got to head out. But I want to say thank you. Thanks for being on the show and for answering all of our questions and for giving us kind of a look into what you guys have coming up. This is exciting, and I'm really trying to. You're making me salivate over here, and I want to start looking at Ironcutter and see if I can get some for one of my tee boxes. I'm excited.
Hey, do it. We've got some ways, reach out to us and we'll tell you how close it is that we can get it to you. But we want as many different people to try, whether it's cool or warm season grasses, and just try new stuff. That's the fun of turf grass and growing something is we're always working on something. There's always something cool to try for your situation. So tinker with it if it's your hobby. We like telling people we like working in this stuff. We're nerds on it too. And yeah, I enjoyed coming on and certainly we'll stay and answer anybody's question that has one.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here, and I will see you guys later.
Adam, hi, sir.
Yes.
Pleasure to speak with you, sir. Question about this Ironcutter. It's definitely a cultivar that you spoke to it earlier as Ryan DeMay. He had been telling me about this one for a while now. I myself, I'm here in Southern California, real close to Arizona and Mexico. Zone 7A, 7B. I'm sorry, 10A, 10B. I mean, it's been hot out here. We haven't really gotten a frost and a real frost in a couple years. So these cold tolerant cultivars of Bermuda grass, I'm very much interested in.
Yeah.
To maybe perhaps have a green lawn year round. Maybe not year round, but longer than most. Actually, I'm about a month or two out from beginning a renovation here. I have a stand of common Bermuda.
Sure.
I'm planning to kill that all off and install some irrigation and whatnot. And next spring, hopefully, put in some a better cultivar of Bermuda grass. Now, I haven't decided on that.
Sure.
Somebody like myself, a homeowner, how far out is MVS from being able to provide, let's say 3,000-4,000 square feet of this Ironcutter?
Yeah, I think we're right on target for a renovation like that. We have some in Escondido, California growing, and Nuevo, California growing.
That's great.
And so, yeah, we're going to have that available. And then that acreage is going to get bigger and bigger. So could we do, 50 of those right now? Maybe not. But what we want to do is the ability to serve and have, 100 plus acre stands of Ironcutter ready for sports surf, golf, and homeowners. We feel like it can be that broadly adapted. So yeah, it'll be ready, and we can certainly get you to those two named farmers that are down there that we work with. They're great partners, both of them, and yeah, we're pretty excited that they both have it. But they're essentially ready to go, and that's what we want to do in every market. And we're at different degrees of success for each market in the U.S. that would use it. And so in some places we have exactly what we want, and we're just building and expanding acreage. In some places, we're still looking for the best partner of who we want to work with and ultimately who wants to work with us with this cultivar, because there's a number of good ones out there. Ironcutter is not the only good one. Spin talked about Tahoma, and I think that's a very good one. Tip Tough is one that does very, very good in California for drought. But Ironcutter is up there, and it's one that I think is a gorgeous homeowner grass. We put a picture up today on our Instagram, if anybody follows us on Instagram, of what it looks like in East Tennessee right now, and it is glowing. Now, we've had a lot of rainfall, so that helps, and he's growing it a little bit higher than most homeowners would, which helps. But it's a gorgeous grass at homeowner height, and so we want as many people to use that as we can, and so that's why we try to talk about it as much as we can, because we've been looking at it for 10 plus years, and we're pretty excited about it. Now we want the whole world to see, hey, these are what new Bermuda grasses can do, and we hope that it makes your life maintaining it a little bit easier than especially your common Bermuda stand. One thing I'll caution you to is common Bermuda is really hard to kill in Southern California. So not sure about your plan on how you want to do that, but it's going to take a pretty thorough one. So typically what most people do is, and you may know exactly, but it's a couple rounds of a glyphosate fusillade combo is typically what it's going to take. So 2 to 3 applications there. And I think what the key piece of it is irrigating after applying the rounds. And so what you'll get is, the kill, and then you'll get that irrigation. You'll see that regrowth. Then you get that little bit of green tint on the regrowth, kill it again, irrigate, and then if you need it a third time, then it seems like it dies, but I don't know that I've had success in Georgia under 2 times. It's taken at least 2 and most times 3 rounds of a glyphosate fusillade combo to kill it, especially common.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few pros on that in particular, and yeah, definitely it's glyphosate with Fusilade, and some have just suggested a triclopyr kicker just to help that get in there, and they hate it. And that's the reason why I'm doing this like in August. It's still kind of prime season for me, and it's still growing really fast. So the whole plan was try to kill as much of it as I can off while it's still growing, and then install, grade, whatever I need to do some ryegrass over the winter so it's not bare, and then when it comes time, springtime, go out there and look for some decent sod. Yes, Tahoma 31 was something I was looking at, definitely. Maybe even Tiff Grand if I could get it. I mean, there's a couple of dealers around in my area, some in Palm Springs, and yes, Escondido as well.
Sure.
So I mean, it's still up in the air. I mean, when the time comes, I'm gonna decide finally. But I'm kind of just like rubbing my hands together to see like, all right, what's out there? What can I get? And especially paying for sod. I'm definitely trying to get something quality as opposed to like something general that's everybody has really.
I'll tell you, pretty biased opinion here, but of course, think Ironcutter is the best. Tahoma is a very, very good one. Tahoma is almost a bluish green color. Ironcutter is more of what I'd call like a true green color, and so different people prefer each one. You do a blind test or whatever, and half prefer ours, half prefer theirs. It's just a natural way people look at color. But I think those are the two prettiest. How about that? So I'll put those in that category of the new ones that will give you the least amount of effort and work and be efficient, but still be gorgeous grasses that don't take a lot to maintain it, that you can beat up and it'll come back. So that would be my personal ones. Tiff Grand, good. Starting to get a little longer in the tooth. You look at some of the other ones that are available in California. Tiff Tough would be the only other one that I consider. I think Ironcutter and Tahoma are a little bit prettier than Tiff Tough.
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, the pictures that I've seen, at least from the Ironcutter and of course the Tahoma, they look great. I'm very much interested in one of those. But yeah, that was just a general question for you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I don't know if Spin or Evie wants to get in here and have any other questions for the gentleman.
Let me see. So first one would have been elevated. Hey, Cam. Yeah, so the 7 new cultivars of Turf Type Tall Fescue, yes, we're going to make them available, all of them this fall. So what people need to understand is as new ones, you've got to put that ground into production and produce seed over a couple of years. And so as you have the previous generation declining, we're taking acres out so we can put the new class in. There's a point where there's a ramp off and a ramp down of the other ones. So the new ones are increasing in acreage, increasing in seed availability. This is the first true year of commercial release. And so you'll have somewhat limited amounts of, you have Raptor 3, which was one of the darlings of the previous class. If we have 2 million pounds of it available this year through our network of distributors, Raptor LS, lateral spread ability with the new one, it may only have 500,000 pounds this year, and so it's really going to depend on who gets it. And through our wholesale distribution network and maybe a couple online retailers, we're going to see. So that's going to determine how much you see it. But all 7, we're gonna try to push it out as much as possible in the biggest amount as possible. But you're not going to see any million-pound cultivars yet. I don't think any of the 7 are going over 750,000 pounds, which is not a whole lot in turfgrass seed. So you start parceling that out to all our different distributors, it doesn't really go far. So you may see 1 new name in a blend or somebody advertise that, or 2. I seriously doubt whether there's going to be 1 distributor in our network that's going to have all 7. So you're just going to have to get familiar with the names, and that's part of our marketing. And then as we bump along seed through the years and increase that, you'll start to see certain people with certain ones. The good thing I can tell you is no matter which of the 7 you use, they're better than my best of the last generation. So we know categorically that these are better. I tell people, bluegrass, you can use a bluegrass from 30 years ago, and it can be just as good as one that they've got today. Fine fescues can be this way. Bent grasses can be this way. And tall fescue and perennial, whether it's mine or anybody else's, just use the new stuff. They're better. They're better in a number of different ways. So I think that's important. So you'll start seeing the names. I named all of them with a little bit of help, and we'll start advertising that and marketing that and start doing deep dives into what they are and how effective they are,
From Evie, if you had to choose either one top monostand or blend for cool season grass, what would you recommend for homeowners? There's a lot of hype around Grand Slam, Mazama, Midnight, Everest, along with the 365 SS.
Yeah, so a couple different ways you can look at this, right? So the way I always look at it is what's going to do the most for the least amount of effort for me. And so for me, that's tall fescue as a species. And these new ones, the blade and the texture is getting down to Kentucky bluegrass type levels. So for me, it would be tall fescue. Other people, it would be, I like blends or mixtures versus mono stands. So, for me, it would be, a 90-10 or, some sort of Kentucky blue perennial ryegrass mixture. 365 SS would be a mono stand. There are 3 different types of Kentucky bluegrass, but they would be considered a mono stand blend. and that one would be the best of what we consider low input Kentucky bluegrasses. So 365 SS came out of the sports turf world. It's been on a number of high-end fields. I mean, we've got a long roster of fields right now that they're the current field surface, the Rose Bowl being the biggest, and so it's the current surface of the Rose Bowl. So if you want to tell all your neighbors you get the same grass as the Rose Bowl and it doesn't use a whole lot of inputs, 365 SS if you like Kentucky blue. But if you don't want to do anything, you just want to leave it alone and then stripe it up and have it look good, don't want to put any fertilizer or chemicals down on it, don't want to mow it a whole bunch, start looking at some of the new tall fescue cultivars is what I would say.
Here's another one. Interested in KBG cultivars in the Midwest on the edge of the transition zone. Northeast Kansas, hot and humid summers. What's something that they could potentially use there?
Yeah, we've done a lot of research. Manhattan, Kansas is an NTEP site, so definitely going into the NTEPs and looking in Manhattan, Kansas. So when you're looking for Kentucky bluegrass, you're going to see what's in 365 SS. So in the NTEPs, they wouldn't rate 365 SS. They would rate the 3 cultivars in 365 SS up against the other commercially available cultivars or experimental entries into the NTEP. So in this case, 365 SS is Blue Note, Legend, and Bolt. B as in boy, Bolt, Kentucky Blue. And so they all do really, really well out there. Part of the reason we like 365 SS is just like Ironcutter on the warm season side, I can take 365 SS pretty much anywhere and know that it's going to do well. Does exceptional with humidity, does exceptional in both hot and cold type of transitional places. And so I think that would be a great choice. We have some good distributors in the area, one of which actually sells it online. So you can start looking for it online in that area, and they can get it to you in small amounts. So you don't have to buy a 50-pound bag if you only need 5 pounds or 10 pounds or 20, So if anybody needs information on that, just send me a message. We'll get you to the right people. But yeah, I'd say Northeast Kansas, 365 SS.
Here's one. Any research going into a creeping turf-type tall fescue cultivar?
Yeah, so we've had and are continuing ongoing our research into spreading, creeping, rhizomatous is a word that sometimes is used, which is a bit of a misnomer. So creeping turf-type tall fescue, what I always say to this is, what are you trying to get it to do, right? And so most people, when you think creeping, they equate it to Bermuda grass. And so you want something that will fill in a spot in your yard that your dog made, And so right now, the turf-type tall fescue cultivars are not that aggressive. They're not even as aggressive as Kentucky bluegrass. They will spread, and they do spread. The thing I tell people is it's relative. So it's relative to your perception of other species and what your idea of creeping is. So for us, we can measure them. We can show you that it'll produce a rhizome. It'll produce a stoloniferous daughter plant. It will move, but how much is it going to move over time? Probably not a whole lot. In 6 months, might go a tenth of an inch. But what we see when we select cultivars that show this spreading ability and what we call our spreading turf type tall fescues are LS or lateral spread cultivars is we're looking for something in a space plot. There's 10,000 plants in a space plot nursery. We're looking at ones that have irregular growth in a direction, and ones that don't, we'll kill them off. And the ones that do have irregular growth in a direction or look like that they're spreading, which ultimately means it's tillering out, the leaf is rolled out and folds out, and it grows into a tougher, stronger, quicker establishing plant. We take those individual survivors and we start breeding them together and make even stronger ones. And then we start to test how far it's growing. And so a lot of companies do that in the hopes that one day we'll make turf type tall fescue like Bermuda grass. And so I tell people, yes, it'll spread, but if you're looking forward to do it like Bermuda, it's probably not you're probably gonna be disappointed. So it's just about setting your expectations. But yes, in our program, anything that has an LS at the end of the name, so Firecracker SLS, or the new one that we'll release is Firecracker GLS. That LS stands for lateral spread, so it was selected for a spreading trait.
Sounds exciting. These, especially with the names you hear, and you're like, "Oh, that sounds cool." You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. People get excited, and they're like, "Oh, wow, it's going to fill in everything in my yard, and it's going to jump into my neighbor's yard, and I'm going to love it, and not have to do anything." Not there yet. Don't think it's going to run a foot in 6 months. It's just not going to be like a warm season grass, but it will spread, and it will give you stronger, faster establishing, resistant to disease cultivars that are better than the previous generation. So again, whether it's my stuff or anybody else's, you use the new stuff, use the new introductions, the newest ones you can find. And there's going to be an upcycle of new turf type tall fescues to use from everybody in the industry,
Awesome. Another bluegrass question about the 365. Which cultivar is the most aggressive spreading to help offer the sod strength in the 365?
And this is a tough one because you've got what I call shear strength versus spread. It's inconclusive on spreading. So Blue Note compared to Legend compared to Bolt, there's not one where we go, aha, that one's way better than the other ones. If you said shear strength, you take it on the machine, you take a piece of sod and you pull it apart and measure the pounds of force per inch. We tend to see Bolt. B is in Bolt. That's a Jefferson, Washington classification type. It acts like a Eurasian type, which are known as quick establishing, high wear and traffic tolerance. I should say the quickest establishing class of Kentucky Blue. So it makes a dense mat quicker than any other bluegrasses. They come from Eurasia, so in between Europe and Asia, where they have a limited amount of time to grow before winter. So they create these dense cultivars, and they tend to, I guess, spread aggressively and do a really good job. But it's close. I mean, in the testing, the reason we put these together after getting an assist from Will Schnell at the Rose Bowl is that we saw those type of numbers, that each Kentucky bluegrass classification has a benefit, and they all have somewhat of a disadvantage, and so it's pairing them together in a way that minimizes the disadvantages and ups the strengths of them. And that's why we do blends of Kentucky bluegrass. You wouldn't want to have a Kentucky bluegrass blend that had all midnight type Kentucky bluegrass cultivars in it. Right. It would be the darkest thing under the sun, and it would never green up in springtime. So that's what you don't want. You want to have balance there where, Bolt, hey, it's great. The problem with Bolt is it's a weird thing with elite Kentucky bluegrasses. As much as it does well for you guys out in the field and people love it, it really stinks at seed yield. So when we grow it to harvest seed off of it, we don't get as much as we do on some other cultivars. And so that makes us keep Bolt as an exclusive in 365 SS. We can't produce enough seed to make it available as its own single cultivar. None of our distributors can buy it as a single cultivar. You got to get it in 365 SS. And that's because we feel like the combination is the best possible use of it with a limited amount. So it's a good one, but get 365 SS, and that'll make sure that you minimize the disadvantages of each Kentucky bluegrass cultivar, and that we've studied and tested and figured out that this is the best combination we have right now for our bluegrass program to put in. And the NTEPs kind of follow along with that. We did that based on NTEP research and some of our on-farm research to get to that point.
On Bermuda grass seed, actually, I have a Just from my own research, you guys have the North Shore, and is it the Rio, the other one?
Yeah.
That,
So we put North Shore. So North Shore is a common type. It's a good common
yeah,
type,
Rio.
but it's a good entry level common type, newer one. And so it's a very salt tolerant Bermuda grass, which sometimes Bermudas aren't really salt tolerant. So that's a good entry level one. If you want a hybrid like fine texture, you're looking at Rio. Yeah. So Rio is a very good one. We're spring green up, pretty similar to Riviera, just in overall turf quality, which I would say would be pretty good. Maybe not as good as some of the vegetative cultivars now. The vegetatives have pulled a little bit ahead of the seededs, but it's
Right.
still very, very good. And you could fool a lot of people with a lot less money, a lot less effort, maybe, if you wanted to take on, putting the seeded in over time. Because I do think they get stronger over time. I do think seededs are native to where you put them. So that's the one advantage I think of seed versus sod. Sod comes with a layer, and you've always got to get through that layer of imported dirt. Whereas seed is native to where you plant it. So if you
Right.
can drive those roots down, that's its home, and it will adapt, and you'll use less inputs right there where you originally seeded it. And so I think that's a decent advantage for grass seed. It doesn't get talked about enough. But as far as look and texture and aesthetics on top, yeah, it's gorgeous. It's a good looking grass.
Yeah, and it's just something from my own things that I've seen on, for example, on the YouTube and stuff. Bermuda grass seed is kind of, it's an interesting topic at the moment. For example, like cultivars like the Arden 15 and the Monaco, those are all out there kind of, being used in a particular way. Is there anything that you guys can potentially are working on or have plans for in the future for an improved seeded variety besides the one you guys have?
We do have a common type. I'll say this about Rio. It was selected and put on the Rose Bowl. So if it's good enough for the Rose Bowl, I think it'd be good enough for anybody.
And that says a lot. Yeah.
So when COVID hit, they didn't have the ability to resod, and so they seeded, and so they chose Rio. So that was Will Snell, who retired since then, but put that down and applied it. And so it's now has been under perennial ryegrass, but the base surface, of that field is Rio. So I'll defer to them again, until that field comes in for the return of the Rose Bowl game and becomes a Bermuda field, which they import from a sod farm, West Coast Turf. It does a fantastic job locally in California. It's been put down there. So I'll throw my hat in the ring and say, I think we can get there. I think we can get there on ease of application. They germinated it in 5 days, grew it in about 60. And they had to grow blankets. So, it'll take a little bit longer without those, but it was a fantastic install. And we've had a number of those just on basic homeowner installs where guys have been extremely happy with what they have. The new class, Arden 15, Monaco, Rio, those I would say, again, like a big three of seeded types. Those are showing more aggressiveness early on. So it's easier and they're more adaptive to, say, bad soil conditions. They germinate a little bit quicker. They infill a little bit quicker, and you just don't have the same problems as the previous generation. Rio being cold tolerant, it doesn't go off color as early. So you have that color deeper into the season. So even in, like, say, a Southern California, at some point the grass is going to turn off and go brown, go dormant. And
Yep.
Rio doesn't do that as much, so you may get another month out of it where it looks in prime condition. On the backside of that, you'll get earlier spring green up, and so it'll start to green up quicker. And even in the NTEP trials, seeded types always green up quicker than vegetatives. So that's another kind of key advantage where that might work for you, and so the green up quality, that's important to you. You might be able to look at a seeded type and it'll do well. So that's Rio.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually haven't ruled out a seeded variety. Like I said, that's up in the air. Whatever, if sod makes the most sense, if seed makes the most sense for my situation, that's what I'll look at. But to your point earlier about the fineness of the blade quality of some of these seeded varieties, they kind of rival the vegetative cultivars, especially when you start using things like plant growth regulator.
That's right.
you'll really start to see how these things start to get really, sort of smaller and tighter. Spin actually has some experience with some of that on some of his fields, I believe.
Yeah, he's done excellent with that. And yes, you start layering on something like that where, when we test things, we're looking for fatal flaws. We're looking for reasons not to bring stuff out. So we put base fertility and base management and base irrigation on top of it. We're not doing anything specialty or what I call exotic, like that. When you do that, it really does change the equation where, some of these seeded types can definitely get there where if you just put basic fertility on top of it, they may not compared to the vegetative. If you said turfgrass quality, I would tell you the vegetatives are ahead of the seededs, but you can make that really, really close with, adding something or having an additional level of care like a growth regulator, like a fungicide or a plant protectant app,
Right.
So it's all about what you want to do.
Man, this is really informative, Adam, and I appreciate your time and thanks for coming on.
Yeah. I mean, I always enjoy doing this kind of stuff. We're always available to talk like this. So more than happy to come on. If people have more questions or, just want to run this back, then certainly have time for it. This is what we love to do. And glad and hope people found it informative. So again, thanks for having me on.
Oh, appreciate it. It'll be on YouTube, and a lot more people that can't make this live chat will download it and listen to it.
Very cool. I like that.
All righty.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you, sir.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, guys.